Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Unspoken Realities, about the safe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector. First of all, thank you so much for joining. We do have quite a diverse group of attendees joining from around the globe, so we are thrilled to welcome you today. We really appreciate your interest to learn and exchange with us on such an important topic. My name is Gabriela Tigam, and I am the Communication and Marketing Specialist for Hans Arnhem Stiftung in Central America. And as many as you might know, the effects of climate change on coffee production continue to trigger an increase in pests and diseases. Although environmentally friendly alternatives to combat these outbreaks do exist, unfortunately, many smallholder farmers are still lacking lots of knowledge and oftentimes are misusing agrochemicals on their farms. So recognizing that the improper use, handling, storage, and disposal of agrochemicals do cause major health and environmental risk for smallholder coffee farming families and their communities, for today's webinar, we will be discussing the importance of promoting their safe use and handling, and also talk about what solutions can be implemented. And to do so, we've invited a group of key industry partners to join us and share their unique perspectives and experience on the topic, and to raise awareness to discuss how the safe use and handling of agrochemicals can be further promoted. And having that said, I would like to introduce them to you and welcome them. We have Thomas Alveteg, Senior Program Specialist at the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, also known as SIDA. Hello, Thomas.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. We have
thank you for having us.
Thank you, Thomas. We have Stefan Ruge, Program Manager of the Initiative for Coffee and Climate at Hans Arnhem Stiftung.
Hello from Hamburg.
Greetings, Stefan. And with us today as well, we have Lilian Törnqvist, Senior Advisor at the Swedish Chemicals Agency, also known as KEMI.
Hello to everybody.
Hello,
nice
Lilian.
to be in here, finally.
Yes, we're happy you could join. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Lilian, Thomas, and Stefan, and we do look forward to a great discussion with you today. So thank you so much for your time. And before we begin, I would like to just go over some quick notes regarding questions. So please feel free to send in your questions directly to the panelists using the chat box found at the lower right-hand corner. We will be addressing your questions at the very end of the webinar. So go ahead and write your questions as they come up. We really look forward to being able to answering them. And to get right into the topic, I'd like to hear from all of you joining us today. So let's get to know your perception on the topic of agrochemicals with the following poll. Perfect. How relevant do you consider the safe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector to be? Not relevant, somewhat relevant, or relevant? And we also have a second question we would like to hear your thoughts on. So from your point of view, is this topic getting enough attention in the coffee sector? Do you think it's not getting enough attention, some attention, or enough attention? And just as a quick note, just make sure you scroll all the way down so you're able to see both questions and answer options. And thank you to everyone who is sending in their responses. Answers are coming in quite quickly, and it is going to be definitely interesting to know everything you have to say on how relevant you consider the safe use and handling of agrochemicals to be, and how much attention you perceive this topic is getting. Yeah, so thank you to everyone who is sending in their answers. We're just going to give you a couple more seconds while answers come in, and also give Stefan the opportunity to get ready for his presentation as he will be sharing some interesting content with us. Perfect. Thank you all. I'd now like to hand it over to Stefan, who will be providing a general overview about the Initiative for Coffee and Climate, also known as CNC, and share why the initiative is giving the safe use and handling of agrochemicals a particular focus, especially during the month of November. So welcome, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, Gabi, for the great opening words, and it's a pleasure to be here. Please, can you go to the next slide? The Initiative for Coffee and Climate was founded in 2010 as an open, pre-competitive partnership of coffee companies and development organizations with the objective to provide coffee smallholder families around the world with the tools, with the knowledge to adapt their production systems to the impacts of climate change. And climate change is such an enormous challenge that a single company would not have the necessary financial capacities or know-how to act effectively alone. Issues like the safe use and handling of agrochemicals are issues for all companies in their supply chains. Therefore, it makes so much sense to work together and to bundle resources. And I would like to highlight once again the pre-competitive character of our initiative. Our members from the private sector cooperate together within Coffee and Climate and contribute their own know-how and knowledge for a continuous development of our relevant climate knowledge of our approaches. Our foundation, the Hansa-Neumann Stiftung, is implementing partner of Coffee and Climate, and with SIDA, we have a strong partner from the public sector on board. Next slide, please. As Coffee and Climate, we are currently working in 7 countries: Guatemala, Honduras, Brazil, Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, and Indonesia. In all of these countries, we have our own field offices, our own agronomists, our own boots on the ground as an initiative. Next slide, please. So usually when it comes to the effects of climate change, we talk about topics like how can we adapt coffee production systems to secure yields and quality of coffee, or which kind of coffee variety is most resilient. We talk about how climate change impacts the matters of women and youth, or how it endangers the livelihood situation of coffee farming families. So there are actually so many important topics to talk about. So why agrochemicals? Why have we chosen this topic for our campaigning months? Next slide, please. Because the application of agrochemicals is a reality in all coffee communities around the world, be it through intensive coffee farming systems that are based on monoculture, which only generate productivity at all through the massive use of fertilizers, since the soil is practically dead, or be it through increased occurrence of pests and diseases, such as the coffee borer or coffee rust. More pesticides are used in coffee communities, or be it through an increased weed pressure that can also be associated with climate change, and therefore also more herbicides are used in coffee communities. Next slide, please. And when we think about the use of agrochemicals, or when we see marketing flyers, advertisements that try to sell their products, we always see people that are protected and are well prepared for the application of these highly hazard products. But what is actually the reality that we do not see on the marketing and advertisement flyers? What is the unspoken reality we try to raise awareness here? Please, next slide. The unspoken reality is that there's a total lack of awareness of the hazards related to these products amongst the farming families, amongst the coffee communities. Most vulnerable members of the family, like youth, children, women, are also most at risk of being harmed from these products. Families store these products in their kitchen next to food and water. And that is exactly or precisely because why this unspoken reality, the topic of safe use and handling is such an essential component of the work of Coffee and Climate, why it is a central part of the work we are doing as a global initiative. Next slide, please. In 2017, we conducted, together with KEMI, supported by SIDA, an environmental and health impact assessment. And the main outcomes of the study were that there's a general lack of awareness about the effects of pesticides and herbicides exposure on health and the environment among the farmer communities, and especially among the most vulnerable groups, like children or like women in the households. There's also a lack of adequate legislation and control mechanism in coffee producing countries and regions regarding the handling, disposal, or distribution of pesticides. And also there's a limited knowledge and capacity amongst agro input retailers. The people that are selling the products to the farmers often themselves do not know how dangerous they are actually. So therefore, together with the Tropical Pesticide Research Institute, TPRI in Tanzania, and KEMI, we developed as Coffee and Climate an action plan to ensure the safe use and handling of agrochemicals, using our well-established farmer extension network as a foundation and using or getting the expertise and knowledge from TPRI and KEMI. Next slide, please. And our action plan is based on two main components. First, reducing environmental and health hazards, for example, by promoting agroecological coffee production systems and hence reducing the need for external inputs. Or for example, establishment of safe and proper storage facilities for agrochemicals. And the second main component is reducing the vulnerability of farming families to this product. First and foremost, to a broader awareness raising, training on integrated pest and disease management as an alternative, and then also how to apply this product in a safe way. And this includes also the entire family, but also the workers on the farm. So really a holistic approach here. And with that, I would hand over to you, Gabi.
Thank you for this introduction, Stefan. I'd like now to share the full results and ask you to please share your first thoughts. So maybe Stefan, you can begin, and then I will hand it over to Thomas and Lilian in case they would also like to react to the results.
Yeah, so my first reaction would be that I'm really glad that most of the audience thinks it is a relevant topic. So it is worth to talk about, it is worth to have a webinar about this topic. And yeah, I mean, there's some attention regarding the safe use and handling. There's some action in the field, but I would agree to the last point that there's still not enough attention about this topic. Or the first point, sorry.
Thank you, Stefan. And Thomas, why don't we continue with you?
Yeah, I quite agree with Stefan there. And while it's maybe not surprised due to the title of this webinar that people actually that joined are interested in the topic as such, maybe if we should ask anyone on the street, the reply might be slightly different. But I do think actually that, as Stefan also mentioned on the second question, that yes, we need actually to put much more attention on pesticides.
Absolutely. What about you, Lilian?
Yes, of course, I agree with Thomas and Stefan. And I'm not surprised. I mean, it's time consuming to reach out, especially as this project is working with small scale farmers and they are spread in so many places. And how can you reach them all? So that, and we will discuss that later, but I fully agree what was already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. Thank you all. Before we transition into our table talk discussion, I would like to give Lilian and Thomas the opportunity to just give us a brief introduction to KEMI and SIDA and share what the role of both agency is when it comes to the safe use and handling of agrochemicals. So Lilian, why don't we start by you?
Okay, thank you. Yes, first of all, perhaps I should explain KEMI is an agency under the Ministry of Environment in Sweden. And we work, I mean, nationally and within European Union and internationally, often with the support from SIDA in our project. We work at a global level, like this project. We work at a regional level and also bilateral. And our main task is to work with colleagues at the agencies or ministries in other countries to support them, to train them and discuss together how to improve the situation. I think I stop here for this.
Thank you, Lilian.
Yeah, Gabi, you already mentioned that SIDA stands for the Swedish International Development Agency. And well, behind that long name is then actually that this is a Swedish government's agency for working with development. And we work with civil society organizations, with government agencies and private sector around the world. And it's all about supporting people for a sustainable livelihood with a clear focus on poverty reduction, with, of course, the aim at the end that actually give the tools and knowledge to poor people to actually change their situation, to improve their livelihood. And within SIDA, which is a fairly large agency, I work with our global programs and responsible for sustainable consumption and production, or in other words, the SDG 12, if you look on the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are really happy to work in this private-public development partnership together with HRNS and with the coffee companies that forms the support to this coffee and climate program. So that's really, I would say, one of our flagship programs when it comes to our global commitment to sustainable development in the agriculture sector.
Thank you, Thomas and Lilian. And having that said, we will now begin with our table talk discussion. So just so you know, the table talk discussion is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, we will be addressing the reality of agrochemicals in coffee production and describe what this reality looks like from each of our participants' points of views. In part 2, we will highlight the relevance on the topic and talk about what solutions are available to promote the safe use and handling of agrochemicals. And at the end of the discussion, we will focus on the importance of collaboration and strong partnership to achieve great impact. So let's get started. Stefan, I'd like to start with you. What role does climate change play in the safe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector?
Yes, climate change has major impacts on the interaction between the coffee tree and its pests and diseases. For example, growth rates of pests and the number of generations they achieve per year, the pest mortality due to low temperatures are all interconnected, all linked with the impacts of climate change. And also disease epidemics are strongly connected to climate conditions. And in many coffee producing regions, you can hear farmers complaining that there are pests and diseases that have never appeared before, and now they are in their communities. And also the production of nitrogen-based fertilizers is very energy intensive. It requires the burning of fossil fuels. And when farmers apply these fertilizers on farm, it is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions on farm level. So there's a strong connection between climate change and the application of agrochemicals.
Indeed, indeed. And Thomas, adding on to what Stefan is saying, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this as well. So can we speak about the unsafe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector without talking about or mentioning climate change?
No, I would say we can't do that today. I mean, it's all about breaking the vicious circle of the impact of climate change, which put more stress on coffee plants, as Stefan mentioned, which then actually incentivize farmers to use more pesticides to counteract. So this creates actually vicious circles, which actually we have really to work strongly to break.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lilian, do you agree or do you have something to add quickly?
I agree. And I can just add quickly that also looking at risks, when you have flooding or you have heavy rainfalls and so on, you also have the risk of the substances being sprayed, that they are washed out from the fields into surface water or into farmyards and so on. That is also creating a problem. Thank you.
And maybe just to add what Thomas just said about the vicious circle. The global demand for coffee is increasing. So in the future, we will drink more coffee. But at the same time, because of climate change, it will become more difficult to produce coffee. So farmers have actually a strong incentive to try to produce as much as possible on the land, and often then using external inputs like pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers. So we have to break these vicious circles so that at the end, farmers are not using more, but have more knowledge about alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Stefan, let's talk a little bit about Coffee and Climate. So Coffee and Climate provides on-farm knowledge and learnings on the topic of climate resilience to smallholder families on the ground. You, as program manager of CNC, you've been to the field and you've seen what this reality looks like. So maybe you can describe what is this reality for all of those who might not go to the field and might not be exposed to what that actually looks like.
Yes, so pesticides and herbicides are produced to kill pests, to kill insects, funguses, or weed, which means they are highly toxic to humans and animals and to the environment. And the immediate effect of a misuse of pesticides poisoning, of pesticides can become, eye or noise irritation, asthma, stomach ache, etc. And delayed symptoms due to a continuous exposure to these products can include tumor, cancer, or even the deaths of people. And according to a report I read some months ago from the World Health Organization, it is estimated that every year we have around 3 million cases of severe poisoning due to agrochemicals. And out of these 3 million, 300,000 cases are fatal. And most of them happen in development countries, because in coffee communities as well, there's a lack of awareness of farmers. They often do not even believe that by just touching a pesticide or herbicide, they can get ill. There's also a strong lack of knowledge on training on the safe use and handling of pesticides. There are very lax laws and control mechanisms in the coffee communities. Many rural farmers have minimal education, so understanding and interpreting the labels on the products, for example, it is very difficult for them. And also in general, there's a shortage of extensionists, of extension service in rural area. And a last point here is then also the inability to afford protection equipment. Oftentimes it is just too expensive for them. And then, if it's 35, 40 degrees in tropical countries, nobody wants to wear gloves, masks, or entire protection suit. It's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add there, Gabi, what Stefan said, I think that the issue about knowledge, that's really a key. And it's not about just having a seminar and gathering the farmers around and tell them, well, pesticides actually can cause serious health problems. I mean, I'm actually not from the coffee sector myself, or I rather started on water pollution, and especially working on that in Central America, and then looked on the impact of coffee farmers and other crops on surface and groundwater contamination. And then came across quite a few farmers that were complaining about, for instance, rashes on the skin, but they never connected that to the pesticides. I thought maybe it was something I maybe ate something I can't really handle or something, because I think it's about the delayed response of having this effect on your health. I mean, rashes may be one of the easier things, but I think this is one of the key issue also, how to explain and show actually that pesticides will have a long-term effect on your health, which is not something you will see immediately. Maybe it might become next week or over the weekend, or even take many years actually to have a clear, visible impact on you.
Thank you, Thomas. Lilian, I know you've also been to the field. You've also been able to go to Uganda and other coffee producing regions to see the reality of agrochemicals on the ground. So what has your experience been like? Would you agree with the reality that Stefan is portraying? And what are the most predominant hazards, or what caught your attention the most while being there?
Yes, I fully agree what was just said from Stefan and also Thomas. Is it possible to show any photos? Because sometimes I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can also
yeah, good. I brought these photos into this discussion because it's better to look at the picture to understand the situation. At least it was for me when I came out in the villages. Just to explain you, in Europe, for example, we talk a lot about spray drift to protect the environment and also what we call bystanders. And people are not living in the fields like people are often doing here, as you see. They're really living in the fields. And the villages are in the middle of the spraying areas. And that is a big concern for me because spray drift is always happening, and coffee trees, they are quite high, like apple trees sometimes. And the higher you spray, the more is the spray drift. So if we can, you see the houses and you see the coffee trees, they're very beautiful, but I mean, it's a big risk when you live in the middle of this and people are passing by spraying. Could I think I have some more photos that I can show you, also farmyard. So one first step of a solution, because I like to look for a solution, that is, if we can see it later on, what I saw in this village in Tanzania, there were hedges almost around the village. And that means that you have kind of a protected protection area. So when the operator is going to spray the trees, there is still, like protection area by hedges now. Okay, so that is one way, a simple way you can start to explain people. If you put in place hedges around your houses and villages, you are a little bit better protected. Another observation I did was all the children in the villages, and they were very interested in us, of course, when we came, but I could also see their way of playing. They were out among the coffee trees playing, as children do. And my second advice is no kids in the fields, at least not when they are just sprayed. These photos are showing a shop, retailer, where the farmers are going to buy their products. And you see to the right, the woman is holding measure equipment because they are opening the packages in the shop. And then you can buy just a part of it in another bottle that you bring. And this is very common, I have learned. And that is a big problem, because as Stefan and Thomas already mentioned, the labeling is at least one way, a first step, to inform farmers which crops, which dose rates, and what kind of risks should we be aware of by using this product. That will be gone if you open the package and then distribute it into other bottles or so. So that is a big problem, and I think we should try and work against it as much as we can. Industry could also support by providing smaller packages. I know it's more expensive to do so, but it could become one solution.
Lilian, I do apologize for interrupting. Yeah. I do want to be aware of our time, and we still want to get through lots of topics, especially when it comes to solutions. So I think we'll have plenty of time to hear your remarks on that. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences. So now that we've spoken about the role of climate change in the safe use and unsafe use and handling of agrochemicals. And we've talked about the reality and what this looks like. I'd like to transition into our next section, where we will be exploring why this topic is so relevant and what solutions are available. So Stefan, Unspoken Realities marks the end of CNC's November Agrochemical Awareness Month. You've talked a little bit about this in your presentation, but briefly, why an awareness month on agrochemicals and not on another topic?
Yes, till today, I can remember a visit to a farm in Peru, actually. And when we went to the family home, we saw them cut old pesticide bottles in half and use them to storage their toothbrushes. So it was like the first experience for me. And after that, we had a meeting with the farmer group, and we were told that birth deformities are becoming more and more a common issue in the community. And then suddenly a farmer told the story that his wife had actually a stillbirth, a baby with two heads, and no one could explain it. The entire farmer group was really scared, and the farmers did not know what was happening actually. And as Thomas mentioned, sometimes you cannot interlink these diseases with pesticides or agrochemicals, but there might be a high correlation with that. And that was actually my first personal encounter with the topic of agrochemicals and agriculture. And as a program manager of Coffee and Climate, there are many important issues that have to be dealt with and which are often generate more attention in the sector: climate and use, climate and gender. But we all know about the constant misuse of agrochemicals in coffee producing communities in our supply chains. Everyone in the coffee sector knows at least one or two stories that I just told about. But there's still an unspoken reality and sometimes even a taboo to talk about it. And therefore, we have planned this campaigning month to provide the topic with the attention and awareness that it truly deserves.
Thank you, Stefan. Thomas, would you agree? Is this topic not getting enough attention? Is it an unspoken reality?
Yes, definitely. And so I think it's really good initiative that actually you made November as a month, especially talking about pesticides. And I hope we'll continue, because I think it's something that tends to be forgotten quite often, especially now when we have the climate crisis. It's a big issue, and we don't do enough connection to the use of chemicals. And so that's related to many areas related to climate change, not only coffee, but I do think actually that's really important to continue. And I do think that when it's the work that you do and many others on talking to farmers on the farmers to farmers level, where we actually need to have the impact. I mean, regulations, legislation, we'll probably come back to that, is very important. You can have information campaigns with posters and other things, but actually talking directly to farmers and help promote farmer to farmer experience. I think that's the key to make connecting the dots, why you have this kind of health issues that Stefan mentioned. And actually they might actually be directly correlated to actually how you use the chemicals. I think that's really important, and we can't really emphasize that enough.
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. Thank you so much. Stefan, you briefly mentioned that smallholders are depending on the use of agrochemicals to maintain a stable coffee production. However, they're oftentimes misusing them. So what other ecologically friendly alternatives solutions exist or CNC is implemented? Tell us a little bit more of that, please.
Yes, so I think that first and foremost, we need to provide and support farming families with knowledge on the safe use and handling of agrochemicals, but also finding traditional alternatives that are based on integrated pest and disease management. And some of the solutions that Coffee and Climate is already implementing in our program regions includes a continuous testing of new innovations, of new practices, approaches that fit to the specific condition, climatic and environmental conditions for our program regions. Farmers are supported by our field staff. For example, in Uganda, it is recommended that farmers might use alcohol as insect traps that can attract and kill pests. Farmers are also encouraged to burn branches and leaves of trees that are affected. Or in Brazil, for example, our field staff is supporting farmers on knowledge and approaches to make use of organic waste from the coffee wet process so that they can produce biochar, bokashi, and can reduce, therefore, the use of fertilizers. I would just like to highlight here that as Coffee and Climate, we do not condemn the use of agrochemicals. Often, if a farming family can purchase external inputs, it is also a sign of development because they have cash available for that. However, there are alternatives for the use of agrochemicals, and we need to provide farming families with knowledge, information, concepts that are best suited for their conditions, for their farms, so that they can make an informed decision about, should I really apply agrochemicals, or can I find, for example, an alternative, organic composting or insect traps, etc. So there's a holistic approach behind it.
So you talked about integrated pest and disease management. Let's talk a little bit more of that. Thomas, do you have a strong opinion about the integrated pest management, and how can it be further promoted, and how can the knowledge increase so that smallholder farmers are pushing forward to this type of approach?
Speaking as someone living in an urban area, it's easy to say, yes, it's important, of course. For me, that go to a supermarket and look for the organic label on product and say, of course, I would only buying organic. That sounds very easy, but I mean, the whole thing about growing organically or reducing the amount of pesticides, as Stefan mentioned, requires knowledge. And I mean, everyone that has tried to grow some vegetables in their garden, no, it's not that easy. It might look like when you see the commercials or the programs on television, how to grow your own veg. I don't think it's really important that we actually take this serious. Actually, it's actually about farmers' livelihood. And when we do advice, when we actually give them advice, we have to realize actually they're putting their income on risk when they're actually trying a new practice. So it's easy to talk about integrated pesticides management, but we really have, and I think actually you're doing that a lot in your program, do it in a very responsible way, and maybe letting farmers trying it out and step by step acquiring new knowledge and testing it themselves. Well, hey, actually this works. I can actually, by learning more on identify a certain pest or an insect, I might actually only need to spray one part of my plot or my land instead of all that sort of things that requires knowledge and help to actually improve your way of analysis and on how things are, how you produce things. But that's something then I think you actually, you have to do with certain caution to support the farmers to do it stepwise, so you don't risk their income if something goes completely wrong. And then you will actually have a long way back to convince the farmers again, and well, this is something actually that can be way forward.
And this, Thomas, is interesting because we're talking now about at the farm level, right? So we're talking about best practices on agrochemical use application at a farm level, but we can also discuss about best practices regarding the final disposal of agrochemicals. So proper dosage, application, equipment, we have the triple washing techniques, collection centers. So I'd like to bring Lilian on board with this topic and ask her, how can these practices be promoted as well, which are extremely important as well. We talk about farm level, but we also talk about the final disposal. So what are your thoughts on that, Lilian?
Thank you. First, I would like to just support this integrated pest management discussion. And actually, I didn't mention yet that we work also, we have good cooperation with FAO and also WHO, and we work together on this, of course, these methods as well. They should be integrated, as you said, in the overall advice that farmers are given. But as you say, it's very difficult to reach out to each farmer in the small villages, but it's there all the time. I would also like to add the thing about highly hazardous pesticides, for which a lot of work is ongoing now. It is a group of products that have been identified by special criteria, as you already mentioned, highly acute toxic, properties, also causing cancer, also toxic to reproduction. The work that is ongoing is to identify these products in countries and to make action to ban them or withdraw them or restrict them. And then again, we have the problem to reach out. And we will talk more about in the next question, I think, to involve also different stakeholders. But if we are working on risk reduction in general, these are the worst products. They should be handled first. And farmers should understand why they are taking off the market, and also to understand there are alternatives. Now I'm talking about chemicals, but of course also other methods if they are available. So I just wanted to describe the system as such. And I know, for example, in Tanzania, a lot of these things are ongoing. When it comes now to your question, Gabi, about waste or handling of used package and so, yes, it's a big problem. And you know, also from Europe and other countries, we have systems to collect them and so on, but it's a big problem, for example, in African countries, because that system doesn't exist. They collect them, but they stay in those stations where they are collected.
Thank you.
I would like just to add another question or a point again. I talked about highly hazardous pesticides. They are the worst one. But of course, as Stefan said in the very beginning, all pesticide products are problematic. So don't forget that. I mean, and that should be really established in training of farmers whenever you can. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just to add what Lilian just has said, raising awareness and training, it is also, yeah, a holistic way here. Just showing how to apply agrochemicals is not enough. It is also, for example, often women, when they wash the clothes from the men that have applied the pesticides, they get in direct contact of them. Or what do they do with the wastewater of after washing the clothes? So it's really a broader topic, and it's not so easy to train farmers to raise awareness.
Thank you, Stefan. It is true that working with smallholder families at a farm level is definitely needed to improve the safe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector. It's part of the solution, but we need to highlight that it's not all of it. The topic of agrochemicals is very complex and it goes far beyond solutions at a farm level. And this is why it requires strong partnerships and collaboration with different actors in the sector. So with my next question, I'd like to transition into our next section, which highlights the importance of collaboration and strong partnership. So what else is missing? What else needs to be done? I'll leave this as an open question to the three of you, maybe whoever can pitch in. If not, I'll call on you.
If I may start, I mean, I would say as a consumer by coffee or a producer by coffee, you can't live on coffee alone. I think especially now with climate change, we have to look and actually on how to support on the farm level to diversify their production, their crops, so they can actually manage risks in terms of how the weather, climate affect them year by year. That's one thing. And then you mentioned about the whole, I mean, the bigger picture, the value chain. I think there we also have to look on the consumer, not only in the country where coffee is produced, but also then in countries in Europe and United States and so on, where you have a large consumption of coffee. And there I do think that actually consumer demand can actually also change how the coffee is produced throughout the chain. I mean, if a consumer in Sweden, for instance, as I live there, if they start to demand coffee that actually labeled some sort of sustainable label or organic coffee, you will create a mechanism actually also for the coffee companies actually to actually look for producing more organic coffee or selling more organic coffee. So I think actually we shouldn't forget the power of the consumers as well, actually, to nudge this towards a more sustainable value chain when we look on the coffee production.
And just adding to what Thomas just said, there's also higher pressure from the legislation part. The EU, for example, is planning to ban glyphosate in supply chains. So we have to support farming families around the world to be able to comply with these new regulations and also to get a benefit for complying with that. So it's not just the industry that is winning here, but also a family receives incentives for, okay, not using banned pesticides products on their farm, and also providing them with the knowledge and support so that they know which other alternatives are there. So we cannot leave the community, the coffee community, alone with these problems just because here in Europe, we don't want to have glyphosate in our coffee. So we need a continuous support to them, also including the public sector and coffee producing regions or countries. So often there's a lax legislation. The public sector is often very weak also regarding control mechanisms. And I think therefore this partnership in coffee and climate with KEMI, which has a stronger contact to the government institutions, with our foundation strongly linked to the farmers, to the community, and then also for SIDA as a public agency from Sweden, it is a very efficient combination of knowledge and expertise to tackle this issue.
Thank you, Stefan. Adding onto what Stefan is saying, Thomas, why has it been so important for SIDA to partner and collaborate with initiatives such as Coffee and Climate to address the unsafe use and handling of agrochemicals in the coffee sector?
One thing that is very important is the fact that the Coffee and Climate is supported by the private sector. Because I mean, in the long run, I mean, as a state agency, we can support and promote change, but at the end, actually, it is the production, the value chains that actually can make a difference. So we can actually put our part, but I think at the long run, it actually is the private sector companies involved in the coffee production and the coffee all the way to the consumer. That actually, that's a key point here. And I also think I should actually say that as from SIDA point of view, we are providing this support to Coffee and Climate. We are supporting on the global level on the work with the conventions on management of safe management of chemicals through United Nations programs. We are supporting, of course, through KEMI, which is a key to government agencies to improve legislation and capacity within national agencies and in developing countries. And we also do support civil society and network of organizations that are, well, more like watchdogs and actually looking on, hey, I mean, in this country, you're not actually living up to what you signed in the global convention, or legislation is there, but actually it's not implemented. So we think it's very important to work through these different venues actually to reach an impact. But Lilian, you know more about me when you talk about the importance of actually strengthen the capacity on national level.
Yes, that's our main activities. But yes, sure. But that's the first step. As I said, we at the authorities, or colleagues at the authorities, we sit in our offices and we are trying to do risk assessments and risk management decisions and so on. But we need to reach out then. And for example, if I may go back again to the activities very important on highly hazardous pesticides, the worst products that are going to be acted on. When doing so, we also look for alternatives to replace them so the farmers have other products available. And during that process, the stakeholders become very important. All these types of stakeholders we just talked about, the whole chain. So people are informed, there are activities coming, there are concerns, and there will be withdrawals or banning of certain products that we are using in coffee production. But they are also pointing to possible alternatives. And also that it could be an incentive for industry or different types of industry to also come up with better alternatives for those pests. And you see, to get this message through and to really get the change out there in the villages, all these partners are very important. And that's a very good experience we have also in Europe and in Sweden, for example, that I know very well. We work with farmers associations, we work with the industry and other authorities in Sweden. So we all are informed. Now action will be made and there are alternatives available, or there are no alternatives available, but we will restrict very much. And then you see the problems. We keep problematic products on the market, but we need to get the message through to farmers, be aware, and we put restrictions and perhaps require training before you use them. And as I understand, for small-scale farmers, they often get the information from the sellers, from the retailers. So we also need to work with them. And I know, for example, in Tanzania, the authority, TPRI, are doing that. So I see the whole chain. It's very important to get the message through, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Just adding to what Lilian was saying, you're absolutely right, Lilian. You have to work on farm level, you have to work on community level, for example, including the agro dealers, but also then on national level. And for that, you need different partners with different networks and expertise. So no organization can do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stefan, and thank you all for such valuable insights. We have very interesting questions coming in from our audience, so thank you for everyone sending in their questions. We're getting close with time, and I would like to at least try to answer some. So we'll start with pulling out questions from the audience. Stefan, we have a very interesting question here. We have a number of farmers in the audience joining from Uganda, and they point out that they do not see alternatives to agrochemicals or lack capacity to implement what they've learned about safe use and handling. Does that mean much more needs to be done to show them alternatives, or what should be done and who should do that?
Yes, so alternatives are there also in Uganda. And the farmers are more than welcome to visit our trial plots, for example, in Uganda, to see the alternatives, to see also then a cost-benefit analysis. So is it really worth the effort to use an insect trap, or is it maybe then for the farmer cheaper to spray? And the cost-benefit analysis we did is that actually traditional methods are much more efficient. So, and it's a good example here that knowledge transfer is so important. Training of agronomists, of extension service, of farm organization, local government, institutions, or trading companies, for example. So knowledge is there.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. We have another question, I think more addressed to Lilian. So from Honduras, we hear that farmers have it difficult to understand how to use protective gear. Lilian, you spoke about smaller units in retail. What is the role of the agrochemicals industry here? Should they also do more?
Thank you. It has been discussed a lot to also require the producers of the products to make available like gloves and so on. And but it's not there yet. So I can just agree, yes, it's a problem. And who is going to provide this equipment? It's an open question, still discussed. Sorry, I can't give a very good advice, but at least to make available these tools in the shops where you also buy the chemicals. So it's easy for you to get your hands on it. But I know, yes, they are expensive. And also I have understood that the quality of the gloves, for example, you can't just pick one sort of gloves. You need the correct ones. So you also need advice on that. I hope it helped a little bit.
And maybe just to add what you just said, Lilian, it is also then important to raise awareness on the banned products in all the coffee countries so that the government knows, that the farmer cooperatives knows, and that there's also control about it. Just having a list of banned products is not enough if no one controls it. And here again, we need partners like KEMI to really push on the national levels to set legislation in place and control.
Thank you. And one last question to finalize our discussion. So agrochemicals are an important management tool for coffee growers. This question is directed to you, Stefan. Is there a resource for recommended chemicals and application rates for the responsible use of chemicals for specific pests and diseases?
Well, that is a good question. Normally in coffee producing countries, you can find these if you just go to Google. So there are already a lot of information materials available on that. But once again, before you even apply this kind of products, a farmer, a cooperative should always consider alternatives that are not related to agrochemicals, that are not agrochemicals.
May I just add to this when it comes to very practical issues like this? I mean, if the authorities, at least in many places, the authorities are looking into the proposed use of this product, the crop, how many times to spray, and what dose rate. And that is assessed at central level. And then it should be on the label. And that's also why I also concerned if you open the package and you take away that information. But I think also that, Stefan, you are thinking of a very good information system in general in your projects. And you can, of course, add to that information system, like smartphones or whatever kind of tools you can have. So you can get the information directly from websites. I hope it's still going to be built up at the authority level. But if the authorities, I know in Tanzania, they put the lists of products that are registered, and there you can also get the information, dose rates, and so on. So, and that could help at farm level. And I also, don't you have something, I don't know the term, contact farmers or something in the villages that could be very helpful, that are more trained and can support their fellow farmers in the village? I think you work with that as well, Stefan.
Apologies, we are running out of time, and I do want to be aware of the time. And before we say goodbye, I would like to just give you 30 seconds to share some final remarks before we say goodbye and end the webinar. So in 30 seconds, why don't you each share your main takeaways or discuss and highlight one thing you would like to reinforce? And Stefan, let's start with you.
Yes, so I love coffee, and believe me, I drink a lot of coffee, and I want to enjoy a product that does not provide harm to my body, to my health, but also not to the people that are producing it. So yes, it is an important topic.
Lilian, what about you? 20 seconds, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm very impressed of the work that is going on in this project. So I really believe in it, and I think you will make change globally, actually. So congratulations to you for this project.
And Thomas.
Yeah, I hope my sons will be able to drink coffee in 20 years' time also, if you manage to continue your work to find good ways to adapt the coffee producing to the climate change challenges we have today.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you so much. I'd like to once again thank you and everyone for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed our webinar. Just so you know, we will be sending a follow-up email in the upcoming days with a link to the recording and answers to the questions that we were not able to answer during the webinar. And in the meantime, if you would like more information about CNC, just make sure to visit our website and also follow us on LinkedIn so that you can receive updates on our current activities. We hope you continue to have a wonderful day, and we will officially end the webinar. Take care, everyone.